What's up, guys? Welcome to another video. Today, it's a very different topic. A lot of people have been asking me a lot of questions on credit sensitivity and what are some of the things that you got to do when you start applying for funding, or what are some of the things you got to do before you start preparing your journey for credit repair, or possibly you're in the process of fixing your credit, but really aren't sure what direction to take. So in today's presentation, I'm going to break down something called the sensitivity factor, right? And sensitivity factor is essentially something that you can look at in your current situation, and just simply by understanding sensitivity in that situation and your financial circumstances, you'll be able to make more informed decisions on whether or not you should apply for credit, on whether or not you should pursue the avenue of going around getting funding and everything that you need from that perspective, right? So there's a couple things that we'll have to go through in terms of getting this squared away today. So stick with me throughout this presentation. By the end of this presentation, you'll have learned how to do sensitivity analysis in your current situation, and what are some of the things that you got to be possibly looking out for when it comes to establishing your personal credit and building a profile not only just get funding, but at the same is very lucrative in terms of giving you opportunities and ample opportunities to make wealth out of it, right? So the first thing we got to do is we got to understand that credit isn't a game. So you can't treat it like one. A lot of people go into this business and go into getting funding or even the credit journey to think that, hey, look, I can get away with it. I have past credit. I can fix it. And then just think about getting new things, right? Getting new credit, looking to get a car, et cetera, et cetera. So the problem is, a lot of people are looking for credit repair as a means to an end, right? Is it a means to an end? Is it really something that is temporary? Is it a band-aid over the scar you have? Or is it something that's going to be a long-term solution, right? So you got to think about that. You got to think about some of the things that you got to do to make sure that you're not in a situation where you going out there and trying to fix your credit or attempting to fix your credit isn't a means to an end. It's actually a solution, right? So you got to be forward thinking. A lot of people make a mistake of not thinking ahead, right? That's a very dangerous thing. It's like, oh, I'll get my debt now, but I'll worry about paying it later, or I'll worry about the exit strategies later down. And what ends up happening during those situations is you're going to get into a lot of trouble if you're not organized. And there's a lot of things that can happen, which we discuss, right? And we talk about establishing risk parameters. And there's a couple of videos I did on this already, but just to go back into the factors, okay, look, if you were to be in a very situation, like let's say if you lost your job, God forbid, or something happens to you, the debt that you have, right, and the way that it's being carried out, especially if there's a lot of risk on it, meaning you maxed it out, the interest rate's crazy, and essentially it's a huge amount, right? So chances are, like nowadays, the creditors are not just going to charge it off and leave it be and go through a probate department where they'll just, forget about you and your kids, for example, right? They can pursue some of these individuals. And unfortunately, a lot of things happen that, when you sign into these situations, you're not analyzing the risk properly, effectively. So it's going to be problematic. Let's assume that even on successful probate, they still don't succeed. But the problem with litigation is now you have to go through court and you have to give your family some hassle that's not necessary. So those are some of the things you got to be careful with. And then, of course, it's like a lot of people have to look at, the total factor of credit, right? Like what are some of the things that you have to analyze? So the sensitivity analysis, we're going to do that together. Let's look at some numbers, right? So if you look at credit cards, right, let's analyze credit cards. So most of them have a good rate. You start with a 0% interest rate for a little bit, promotional rate could be, 12, 18 months, 6 months, whatever. At that time, a lot of people end up taking a lot of money out of it, right? Sometimes what they do is they purchase a lot of goods, stuff, products, vacation, et cetera, et cetera. And unfortunately, they max it out. So that means that, they think, okay, well, I can probably get in a situation 6 months down the road, or I can pay it off. I'm good. My money's good. But the thing is, nobody can, predict future circumstances. Nobody can actually foreshadow what's going to happen. And a lot of individuals make a mistake of maxing it out. And when the promotional rate expires, you're back to the high rates, like 15+%. And that's ridiculous. A lot of people end up suffering because they end up accepting those type of rates, right? And this means a lot of individuals will be looking at only paying minimum payments, because at the time that they foresee themselves, oh, I'll be okay 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. The reality is they're not okay. And now what ends up happening is they're in a situation where they have to pay the minimum payment. And the worst thing happens is that payment that you're putting every month is actually a lot of interest. So not only did they trap you in this whole game, now you're making money for them, and you're essentially fueling their vehicle, except for yourself, right? So that's dangerous. So this is not a long-term sustainable thing to do. So when your situation is like that, and you're looking for funding as a means to an end, or you're looking for credit repair as a means to an end, and you just want to get maxed out and try to get yourself in a situation where you can possibly exit in a few months because you foresee that that's going to happen. You have to be careful, right? You have to be very, very careful. So here's what most people get wrong during that process, right? So, a lot of things that, like I've explained to you, that, a lot of people foreshadow themselves having a lot more money 6 months down the road. So it's a temporary relief in their mind, thinking that, hey, I'll be okay. But the reality is circumstances haven't changed, right? So if circumstances haven't changed and, nothing's really like adjusted, people are going to be back to square one, which is low income and high debt once again, right? So if circumstances haven't changed, and this is a very important thing, and I want you to understand this, and this is coming straight from me to you, new credit, it cannot solve all debt issues, right? So new credit is not going to be able to solve all debt issues. So once again, new credit will not solve all credit issues. So if you want to change the circumstance, you have to do things a little bit differently, right? And sensitivity analysis is what exactly that is. And we're going to go into that factor in terms of risk parameters and how to do that properly. So the first thing we want to do is you want to analyze your sensitivity. So let's go and do this together, right? Let's assume you maxed out all of your debts, right? Across all your revolving lines, loans, lines of credit, whatever you have, even outstanding credit with vendors. And let's assume they're at the max rate, right? Will you be able to pay at least double the minimum payment on all of those guys, like if you were to be maxed out, right? Ask yourself the question. Be honest with yourself. Are you going to be able to pay at least double the minimum payment on all those guys if you were to be maxed out with the highest interest rate? And chances are a lot of you guys are going to say, well, no, that's not going to be possible, right? So if not, then we have a real problem. A lot of people think that, oh, it's okay, I'll have the minimum payment, I'll be fine. But the chances are, like if something goes wrong, you need to give yourself some leeway, at least some months of leverage to be able to catch up, or at least have a situation where you have room to think creatively to solve those problems. So unless otherwise you're doing that, and by the way, you guys, even if you're borrowing at this time and you're not paying at least double the minimum payment, you're hurting yourself. Unless otherwise you're building payment history, which adds towards your credit scoring model. But again, we're not talking about that. We're talking about maxing out your credit cards here. So you won't be able to afford the minimum payment if that's the case in a sensitivity scenario, if you were to put yourself in a situation of income risk and a lot of other financial risks, right? So that is really the scenario to how to analyze your sensitivity when it comes to credit. So unless you're in that situation, or unless you're going through that phase where you can actually say, well, I'm going to get more credit because, I want to build myself wealth or a long-term legacy instead of just maxing it out and worry about old debt later and just think about handling new debt because I foresee myself in 6 months making more money. And while that's the situation in your mindset, you might think that if you were to do the sensitivity analysis and you got to look at yourself and say, well, here's what the situation is. If I were to max these guys out at 24% interest rate, and there's a lot of calculators out there on Google, will I be able to comfortably afford at least double the minimum payments on each of those creditors, right? And chances are a lot of you guys will say no. So you have to think about that. A lot of people think, well, I'm trying to give you guys answers on, try to be like very conservative here, but their end result is like, trust me, I've done what I had to do in the time where the housing market crisis happened. And I kid you not, the amount of customers that were able to sustain more than the minimum payment and could have doubled it in that time of crisis, if they were to do that strategy that I'm just explaining to you right now, in terms of holding back or at least paying double the minimum payment, if your debt is a little bit larger, they would have saved themselves a home. They would have saved themselves basically an investment property, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of things that was done wrong. And I think this single factor is one of the most critical things in finance that a lot of people don't teach you, right? So imagine life dependent on it, right? Imagine life dependent on it. Why do most people want to go funding and max out their funding options? What do you think that is, right? And I just explained to you. Is it because they want to bury old debt? For them, is that a new start, right? So the problem isn't about maxing out as much as it is to hope and perceive things differently. So in their mind, they're hoping and perceiving, look, in 6 months or 12 months or 18 months, I'll be fine. I'll make income. I'll get into real estate. I'll do some wholesaling and make myself income opportunity. And then, of course, cover these debt obligations. And I don't have to worry about it. But the reality strikes when that time comes, right? Most don't know the dangers that lie ahead, unfortunately. So, or else they wouldn't be worrying or concerned about credit repair, let alone, getting funding. So unless you have a winning strategy that's pretty much guaranteed with a defined exit plan, that, you can pay off the debt entirely in a certain scenario, don't take those risks. It's very critical that you understand sensitivity is not just about your personal credit. It's a question of your livelihood. It's a question of how well you handle yourself financially. It's a question of your family and everything else that depends on it, right? So Don't take those type of risks. A lot of people go out there and max out their credit cards, funding, etc., etc. Be strategic. Look, you can do it maxed out, but be honest with yourself and say, is it the same scenario I was in 24 months ago or 12 months ago? Am I trying to max it out because I want to get more opportunity for funding just so that I can hope and perceive a different future instead of the reality as it is, right? Is it a situation where I know for a fact it's guaranteed and defined exit strategy in 6 to 12 months or 18 months down the road that I can pay off this debt in its entirety? I know for a fact, right? So be very careful when it comes to taking these type of risks. Okay, so we're going to end off our session with a couple of popular Q&As that I've gotten with past and new clients. And I want to explain this process to you guys because I think it's critical that you understand that, as we're building on a couple of different things here on this channel, and we're going to direct the questions in a very important manner here. Okay, so the first question that I get quite frankly, and evidently is, hey, I have previous foreclosures, right? And it's been around 2 years. Can I get a home? Now, albeit that a lot of lenders out there will not hold it against you, some will. Definitely going to have a hard time. Some of the creditors out there will say, look, I don't want to give you a mortgage. You're in a risky situation for us. Even though you put a good down payment, et cetera, et cetera. So there's two ways to combat this, right? And the first way is think about increasing the leverage on your down payment. Increase, like they say, look, I'm willing to put 30% down. Would you do a mortgage? Some of these lenders have reconsideration. So if they say, look, if you're willing to shift the risk, because the down payment is literally shifting risk, right? If they go through foreclosure, you're losing at 30%. But again, there's costs in that process. So the lenders, a lot of the times, they don't want to go through that because a lot of people put 10, 20%. It's not worth it for them. So to shift the risk, and you have to speak with lenders and underwriters or even the financiers that are handling your mortgage file, especially if you're in a situation like that, is you have to explain to them, look, I'm willing to put a higher end down payment, right? And the reason why I want to do this high end down payment is because I feel that there's going to be a little bit more risk shifted from my side, which is I want to take on that, and while you guys take less risk. And most creditors and lenders are willing to work with you. They might ask for an increase in that down payment, et cetera, et cetera. The second option is maybe it's not the time to get a home right now. And if you have and sustainably renting a location and your landlord is happy with you and they can give you a reference letter in addition to reporting that rent, Experian Boost, which is free. You got that, and there's a rental karma. There's all these associations. If you have a track record of successful renting, and the mortgage payments would be similar to that, if anything less possibly, because you don't want to get a mortgage that's like twice as much as your rent, because that doesn't really demonstrate anything. But what you want to do is you want to look at that. Get your rent reported properly. Ensure that the rent is actually comparable to the mortgage. You have some sort of decent down payment. Even in that foreclosure scenario, all that stuff, these conditions can mitigate that. And you'll be in a very comfortable spot. So for them, that's a very critical thing. Okay, so that answer is number one. The second question I get a lot is, I have a lot of late payments on student loans. Will I be able to get funding? And to answer that, there's a three-part answer to that. Number one, exactly what are you trying to do with funding, right? And if you're saying, well, I want to get funding because I want to max it out and see what I can do. I want to buy some things. I want to start a business. All these type of things are high risk. Even starting a business is high risk unless you're acquiring a multi-million-dollar middle market company using a hedge fund or some sort of private equity structure where there's strategic investors with resources that creates economies of scale to help you boost that business and create a successful exit strategy worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Starting a business is still risky, right? So think about why you need the funding. If you're saying I need the funding because number one, I want to get out of a current situation or mess I'm in, maybe, that's not the right time, because at the end of the day, the more panicking you are, the more, distressed you are in that situation, funding is not the right opportunity. Now, there are situations where you have sustainable income to look at the sensitivity analysis, and if you were able to sustain and get the funding, then that's possibly great. So that's the first answer. Second part of that answer about student loans is, if you have late payments on student loans, be honest with yourself. If the student loan payment amount is comparable to the amount of new debt you want to take on, what has really changed in your circumstances? Has your income changed? Has your payment habits changed? Can you demonstrate to me as an individual on a balance sheet that you have successful payment history for the last several months that you're requesting new funding? Or have you just gone through credit repair to bury your dead bodies? So be honest with yourself, right? So if you're looking to get some funding, you got to think about that strategy that we just discussed, the sensitivity analysis and what exactly is the reason for funding. And the third answer to that student loan question is, number one, if it's a student loan that's basically been It's one of those universities or colleges that basically haven't really stayed up to par, and they kind of closed, and basically now it's a debt that is carried on without really any substance. And think about some of the ways that you can arbitrate that, negotiate with the lender who provided the financing on behalf of that college or university, and work out a settlement agreement where, in condition to that, they adjust the credit report, because at the end of the day, it is not an accurate debt anymore. It doesn't comply with the regulations in terms of its accuracy, and therefore you can dispute it or challenge it, right? So that's the way to go about it, and then worry about funding later. So think about those three scenarios. Number one, why exactly are you looking for money? Number two, what has changed in your circumstances? Are the minimum payments on those student loans comparable to a maxed out scenario with the new funding that you're going to get? If so, and what has changed in those financial circumstances? Can you demonstrate a balance sheet with positive payment history? And the third one is essentially, what is the standing of the student loan, right? Does the college or university have any type of things that they can do for you, or can you talk to the financier who's handled that type of financing structure on behalf of those colleges and universities, right? So that's something you want to look at. So let's move on to the next question. The third question, my score is around 590. Can I apply for a mortgage? Now, there's a lot of ways to answer this one, but let me be frank with you guys. Let's first analyze why your score is 590. Is it bad payment history? Is it because you don't have strong enough credit profile? Is it because you don't have that history? So first analyze what is the reason, and be frugal with it. Look and analyze, do the sensitivity analysis, and look at yourself and ask, what could have caused my score to go up 700, let's say to this 700 club, if I made my payment history on time. Possibly start looking at building those habits and increasing your score first, and establish that parameter and habit for at least a good 12 months, or at least 6, at the bare minimum. And then think forward about applying for a mortgage. Because if that is not the scenario, then I would say, stay away from it, because we talked about some of the risks, and we're going to talk about that in the next question, of financing a home, right? So, guys, I'm not trying to hold you guys back from living your dream, but if you're going to ask financing, if you're going to ask to borrow on credit, if you're going to ask to use your personal credit in order to resolve some of the issues, then you have to make sure that you yourself as an individual, who's the greatest asset, by the way, in your life, is yourself, right? You got to be well prepared, because I don't want you guys to be hurt down the road. Question number 4 is, can I get 100% financing? Now, there's a video that I shared. I'm going to actually share it below this video, guys, that we talked about the risk of 100% financing. Now, there are situations where it makes sense. We talked about that. We talked about exactly where your home is, what are the likelihood of asset appreciation in that neighborhood. What is your financial circumstance? Do you have money set aside, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a ways to go about that, but you have to analyze your financial circumstances prior to actually thinking about that. And then number 5, how does your credit repair process work? Now, that's a question I get a lot. Of course, you guys know I never put out my pricing or information out there. I just provide education. But there's 3 ways to do credit repair with me, right? Number 1, you can do it yourself, and I'm actually going to be launching the UPCM in the next couple of days to weeks, hopefully soon. So that's the way that you can do it. You can learn it yourself. It's very in-depth, everything that you need to know at the master level. The second way is I do it with you. So essentially, we have a 12-month program, and what it is I guide you. We do a weekly monthly coaching call. We check where your financials are. We check where your situation is with your credit, and we take actions together by hand-holding you through the process and ensuring that you're getting everything that you need on a structured guidance and transactional guidance basis. And the third option is do it for you. So what I have lately going on, and it's going to happen in California and in Miami, is I'm going to actually create a course where individuals can attend for a day. I'm going to probably push it to 2 days in a couple of months, but they'll learn everything they need to know about credit, and then I'll handle their files for them, hands-free, literally, for the 12-month process. And basically, it's going to be a group coaching. So it's a little bit more pricey, yes, but at the end of the day, the outcome is more significant, because there's accountability partners and all these type of cool things, right? So that's how I can go ahead and ask for my credit repair process and how it works, okay? So with that said and done, guys, I know it's pretty long. I wanted to do this video. I wanted to really take my time to educate you guys and provide the value. If you like what I said, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel if you're new to this channel. Turn that bell icon on, so at least every time there's any video like this, you'll be first to be notified. And then past that point, I think that if you want to share this video with those that you feel would benefit and provide the education as you learned today, it'll be great. And based on what you learned today, feel free to leave a comment. Tell me what you liked about this video. What are some of the things that you would ask me on a personal level if you were to meet me face to face about your personal credit questions? All right. So with that said and done, guys, this is your guide and mentor, Ali Tarafdar. Bye for now.